As you enter the town, you see and hear an excited group of children playing a rambunctious game of tag. Most of the children have large feathers tucked in their belts, and a single child wearing a green cloak chases the rest. He tries to snatch as many feathers as he can. This game is part of a festival, in fact, a series of festivals that will go on all week. This town is named Albervale, which is a bastardization of Owlbear Vale. This valley was once full of owlbears until a dragon came to live here, and who feeds on the owlbears and keeps that population in check. Now, the townfolk worship that dragon, and this week-long festival is a celebration of this town's relationship with that dragon. However, over the course of the week, these games and festivities slowly turn darker and more sinister, and the players learn that this town has a dark devotion to this dragon. Throughout the history of D&D, dragons have been divided by their color, and the different colored dragons live in different environments. White, snow and ice, green forest, black swamp, so forth and so on. During 5th edition, they added regional effects to monster design, which I always thought was interesting and helped with world building. So I think it's great that these regional effects are in the monster manual and tell you how this monster impacts the environment that they live in. However, with dragons, it's always been a little disappointing to me. So like I said, black dragons like swamp, so the adult black dragon will go find a swamp to live in. The ancient black dragon, however, has regional effects that will turn the area around it into a swamp. That always seemed odd to me, that all the dragon's regional effects does is effectively create the environment it wants to live in. I think a dragon's impact could be far more than just environmental. Religious, political, economic, military, magical, cultural, even territorial. There's all sorts of ways the presence of a dragon could change the world around it, and that could inform your world building for your campaign. The town of Albervale that I mentioned in the beginning is an example of how a dragon can impact a religion. So, how did I come to this conclusion? Well, in reading the book, it says that the dragon's environmental impact, their regional effects, creates dense forest around their lair. Forest filled with thickets, thorn bushes. So the townspeople might actually see themselves benefiting from the dragon's presence. The dragon has reduced the population of owlbears and driven the rest of the game animals away from the thorny center of the forest to the edge of the forest where they're easier to hunt. It's also possible that brambleberries, like blackberries, grow in those thickets, and that becomes another source of food for the people. So maybe there's a blackberry pie eating contest as part of one of those weekly festivals. So you see how we're extrapolating from the dragon's regional effects and how that could impact the people who live around it. And in this case, the green dragon has awakened religious fervor in this town who would rather pray to the dragon than be preyed upon by the dragon. Now let's take a red dragon and see how an entire nation could be impacted by its presence. So imagine a nation of dwarven oligarchs, rich, wealthy dwarven families that run this nation because they profit and benefit from the dragon's presence. So because the population fears the dragon, one of the oligarchs who owns an iron mine sponsors the standing army. Just in case the dragon ever turned against the people, he has to tax the people heavily in order to fund this giant army. The red dragon turns all water sources near its lair sulfurous. So another oligarch family has developed this steampunk charcoal-based water filtration technology, and everyone in the nation has to buy one in order to have healthy drinking water. Another family uses similar technology to run gondolas up and down the mountain so tourists can visit the hot sulfur springs to soak in for medicinal purposes. This creates a large tourist trade that benefits the wealthy families. Last but not least is the import and export business, because the dragon also creates portals to the elemental plane of fire. So imagine if you were able to move through one of these portals into the elemental plane and then exit the elemental plane through a different portal on the other side of the material plane, effectively traveling vast distances in a short amount of time, instead of traveling over land, traveling into another dimension and coming out at a different location. Now, this allows an import-export business across the globe, making this nation one of the wealthiest and most prosperous nations, all because these oligarch families benefit from this powerful dragon's influence. But what does that mean for the lower class? Maybe this political and economic hierarchy has caused a rebellion, a revolution of the poor fighting against these oligarch families. Now we have a whole scope of political and economic turmoil to set a campaign in, with drama on both sides of this powerful red dragon. So let's go from fire to ice and talk about the white dragon. But real quick, before I do, I want to give a special thanks to Ginny D and Pointy Hat for inviting me to be a part of Dragon Week. I hope you're enjoying Dragon Week. And if you're new here, I'm Brad Wolf. This is Dire Den, and this is exactly what I do. Talk about monster design, dungeon design, and campaign design, in trying to inspire you with my best ideas for your D&D game. So let's go out of this world with our white dragon, particularly to the Feywild. So the Winter Queen, this powerful arch hag, has made a deal with the rest of the Fey court that she rules during winter. Now, don't get too caught up in why would somebody only rule for one season, because it's the Feywild, and time is wobbly and seasons are strange. The Fey Queen has set this white dragon up with a giant flying castle that hovers all across the Feywild, bringing with it powerful snowstorms, blizzards across the Feywild, ensuring that the Winter Queen's reign over winter never ends. And now the rest of the Feywild has turned to this frozen wasteland under the power of this mighty white dragon and the Winter Queen. So in this case, we're using the dragon's regional effects as a magical means to maintain another creature's magical pact. The White Queen has made this pact and now takes advantage of the dragon's powers in order to ensure that her pact doesn't end unless the players intervene. The blue dragon lives in either desert or coastal regions, and the monster manual seems to focus on the desert variety, as it describes the blue dragon's regional effects as dust devils and sinkholes. However, if we were to shift that to the coast, we could extrapolate that out into, let's say, full-blown air elementals and whirlpools. So instead of sinkholes, whirlpools, swirling waves of centrifugal force drawing ships down below the water and sinking them and leaving their treasures to be harvested by the dragon. So what does that mean for the sea peoples who live near this dragon's lair? Well, the whirlpools could help them establish territorial boundaries, protecting their seaports from enemy invaders. Likewise, air elementals could help their ships sail much faster, attacking and raiding their neighbors, and bringing the treasure back as tribute to the dragon. I think we just created a D&D version of Vikings inspired by this powerful blue dragon. I hope this has inspired you to have more impactful regional effects for your dragons in the future. And you might be asking, what about the black dragon? You covered all the other chromatics, why not the black? Well, because I wanted to talk about one more example here. Imagine what happens when one of these dragons is removed from power. When one of these dragons is defeated or dies, these regional effects will start to subside. And what kind of story can that generate? I have a one-page dungeon based on that very concept that you can download for free. The link is below. Moazdrith the dragon was slain, and the adventurers who defeated him died in the process, leaving his hoard untouched. So the players can delve this dungeon and fend off the other powers that be who are seeking the dragon's hoard, and discover the last vestiges of the dragon's curse, and free both the people and the land from these regional effects of the black dragon. Help yourself, it's free. I think you'll enjoy it, and thanks again for visiting the Dire Den, and I'll see you next time.